Hey, this is Victor Antonio, and welcome to this episode of In Search of AI Leadership. Now, this topic is kind of interesting to me now because as I talk to different companies about AI strategy and implementation, there's a lot of skepticism, there's a lot of confusion, and there's a lack of leadership. And that's kind of what I want to talk about today. I was reading an article by Bernard Marr that talked about the AI leadership crisis, and that kind of prompted me to go down this rabbit hole and investigate what's happening. Why is it hard for companies to find the right AI leaders? And what can we do if we're that company to kind of correct that? And that's what I want to talk about today. Now, if you don't know me, here's a little background. I actually started out in technology. My background is in electrical engineering. My early AI projects date back to, I'll just say, the late 80s. I'm dating myself. And so I've always been, I just love technology, a technocrat, so to speak. I eventually moved into sales, and then I have this beautiful combination, I like to call it, between technology, sales, and business. And that kind of gives me the platform to really analyze what's going on in the market and maybe provide a different point of view or a vantage of assessment to say, this is what's going on in the market. By the way, if you get an opportunity, check out my new book, The Future of Selling. Now, The Future of Selling is all about the rise of AI agents. If I take a step back in 2017, Dr. James Anderson and myself wrote a book called Sales Ex Machina, How AI is Changing the World of Selling. We published it in 2018, and this is 4 years before ChatGPT. I'll say that again, 4 years before ChatGPT. We already saw the AI wave coming. I did not anticipate the acceleration after ChatGPT launched or OpenAI launched their ChatGPT. And so now we're moving towards autonomy, reasoning agents, and that's why Future of Selling, again, it's a great book. Check it out if you want to understand what's coming. I'm not going to recommend Sales Ex Machina because that was pre-ChatGPT, and I think that content is dated. But if you want some up-to-date information, check out The Future of Selling. Now, what's happening? What's up with this churn rate? Why is it that companies are having a hard time finding the right person, and then number two, keeping them? One study showed that the turnover rate for the average CAIO, Chief AI Officer, is 18 months. Now, you got to think about that. Sometimes you're paying these people, $500,000 a year plus, bonuses, whatever it may be. And so it's a lot of money. But also we're having this high turnover. So what's happening? This other study showed that 50% of companies have dissolved or replaced the Chief AI Officer within 2 years of actually implementing it. In other words, skepticism, pessimism, they step out. But as we know that if you're not in the AI game, you're not going to be in the game in the long run. So here's the big question. Why? Why are they failing? What's going on? And that's what I want to talk about. Here are 5 things that are going on that I think might help you understand what's going on in trying to find the right CAIO for your business. The first is the expertise paradox. We'll talk about the silo effect. We'll talk about expectation mismatch. That's kind of self-explanatory. Talent tension, and the last part is communication. This is why they're failing. Let's go into the first one. The expertise paradox is interesting because what's happening is it's hard to find the right person. It's almost like trying to find a unicorn because this person that you're looking for, this ideal person, has to have 3 major qualifications. The first one is to have a deep technical understanding of AI. That in itself makes for a rare person. Number 2, they also have to be good at business. There's no point being good at AI if you're not good at business. Last part is that they have to have industry domain expertise. In other words, if we're going to build something, we got to build it for somebody. That's the industry. And we have to know how to execute, again, with AI and make it profitable. That's the business acumen. So if you can kind of visualize a Venn diagram, we need AI expertise, business acumen, and industry experience or expertise. And trying to find that person is very difficult. One study here showed, it was a survey done by MIT, that only 20% of companies believe they have the right person to implement and execute an AI strategy. Now, how sad is that? Said another way, 80% don't believe they have the right person or the right strategy to actually execute. So again, finding the right person isn't easy. Number 2, problem number 1, hard to find the right person. Number 2, even if you did find the right person, what tends to happen is this. A lot of these roles are created almost in a silo, standalone, almost like an experiment, if you think about it, right? That's why those folks are in a jar. Okay, we're gonna play with AI. We're going to dip our toe in the AI water, and we're just going to put this person over here. All of a sudden, you've created this isolation silo effect. And what begins to happen is that, again, they're not talking to different departments, and that's almost like kind of setting it up for failure. Only 10% of organizations have fully integrated AI into their core business process. Again, one of the reasons is that we create these silos for AI without thinking about the more broader strategy. So there's a lack of integration. There's territorial conflicts. That's a big one. We all know that once you start implementing something new and it starts crossing over into CIO territory, maybe CTO territory, Chief Information Officer, Chief Technical Officer, or a CDO, Chief Data Officer, and all of a sudden you throw in the fourth CAIO, then all of a sudden, again, these silos form, but also this territorial warfare begins within the company. And last is that it's happened, you hire somebody, you give them some specific task, without understanding that somewhere else in the organization, somebody may be working on the exact same thing. So hiring somebody in isolation is never the right move, but yet that's what we tend to do. And I believe a lot of it comes from the fact that we don't buy into the AI strategy. We still treat it as an experiment, a little beta project off to the side. And that's the mind shift that has to change. In other words, we have to look at AI as now being almost like oxygen, or the cognification of our business. By cognification, I mean we're going to put AI into all aspects of our business. And unless you accept that mindset, you're always going to run into these silo issues. Number 3, expectation mismatch. What we think and what we want often don't, coincide. So for example, unrealistic timelines and goals. We underestimate how long it takes for something to be, again, developed, implemented, executed, reviewed, rinse and repeat. So what happens is we give unrealistic timelines. And when we do that, again, when we don't get the results we want, we're disappointed. We want immediate results. That's the other thing. We're going to implement, here's a timeline, short timeline, and within that timeline, I want to begin to see these results. And again, it doesn't coincide with reality. We underestimate also the investment required in this new infrastructure, this new data structure that is required. What skills are needed? And when it comes to change management, how do we have to change as an organization? So too often we underestimate the cost, skills developed, how much time it's going to take to bring people up to speed. And last but not least, it's the change management aspect, which is how do we change the company's mindset to see AI as something that has to be integrated, adopted, and utilized, and again, executed on. And again, what happens is a lot of CAIOs, when they fall into this, I'll call it the silo trap, they feel like they just need to build something quickly, execute it, and show it to top management. In other words, demonstrate something. But in so doing, they tend to focus on something so narrow that maybe it doesn't have the overarching business value of what everybody else expected. And then again, we go negative on the outcome because it's not doing everything we wanted. And again, so you see the difference here, or I guess the challenge here. The CAIO is trying to implement something quickly, probably under budget, to bring it to market, or at least bring it as a product or service and show it to upper management or the organization. But because it's so limited, it doesn't fulfill the major requirements. People go, well, that's not really going to do anything for us or really help us. And again, what happens is it collapses on itself. So this study by Accenture was really interesting. Accenture's AI Maturity Index, only 12% of organizations achieve AI transformation success. 12%. And the reasons? Again, underestimating the time and investment required. So if you're thinking about implementing an AI strategy, it's not so much about finding what we want AI out in the company. In other words, where do we want to implement AI? It's thinking about what's this going to cost in terms of revenue, time, effort. What's it going to really cost us? And really sit down and do an analysis and then set realistic time frames and goals and then measure against that. And I think that's the challenge we have today. Number 4, attention for talent. This is just the overarching, pushback for a lot of companies that they're struggling to find the right people. The World Economic Forum did the study that shows that AI talent has surged 74% over the last 5 years. 74%. And these salaries continue to go up. but also try to find the right skill sets. As AI levels up, skill sets has to be leveled up, salaries are leveling up. Just trying to find the right person becomes very difficult. So here's the problem. The CMO struggles to build an effective team. Again, due to the competition, they just can't find the right people. And if they do find the right people, maybe we don't want to pay them the right salary. The reality is you're going to have to loosen the purse string, so to speak, or open the wallet further because higher compensation is going to be necessary. But what happens when you don't have the right people and you don't bring on the right people because you don't have the budget? You hire people who really can't execute at the level you want them to, which often leads to work with what you have mindset. Many of us have heard that, right? Your boss says, hey, you need to work with what you got. Just work with what you got. This is the budget we have. We have no more. Here's the budget. Just work with what you have and see what you can do, right? Which leads to, again, the CIO's inability to actually deliver on results. When you have limited budget, limited resources, you're going to get a limited product or service. And then what tends to happen is the product falls short of expectations. And when the product falls short of expectation, everybody goes, hey, I knew it wouldn't work. That's why I didn't want to invest a lot of money. This is a doomed self-fulfilling prophecy that we get into. Number 5, again, trying to understand why CAIOs fail is communication. The ability to communicate. When you're investing in AI, in an AI strategy, a blueprint, if you will, it has to diffuse through the company where everybody buys into it. The problem is a lot of people have a hard time with change. Change management is very difficult. And so folks have the wrong attitude. So what is the job of the actual leader in this case? Is to not only, let's assume for a moment that they have the resources. Let's assume for a moment that they have the resources, they have the talent, they have the budget. Even if you have all those dominoes lined up nicely, it doesn't mean that people will accept it. So I believe in the ABC philosophy that attitude drives behavior, it drives consequence. If people do not have the right attitude towards a technology, the behaviors will reflect that. In other words, instead of using AI or trying to implement the project, their behaviors will sometimes undermine, if not sabotage, the product. Sabotage actually the actual product or process. So what do we have to do as leaders? If you're a CAIO, part of having, again, your technical expertise, business acumen, AI knowledge, if I can add a fourth one, it would be the ability to communicate. The best communicators know how to communicate the message, communicate the urgency, get everybody on board, get everybody to participate, and you almost have to be this person that actually delegates and also regulates people and helps them along. In other words, brings them along for the ride, so to speak, on this AI journey. This is where the CAIO has to be able to communicate what is the vision, where are we going, why are we trying to do this, and why you should come on board and help us make this a success. So these are the 5 things that, again, a lot of CAIOs are struggling with. If they can't communicate the message or the vision, they're not going to be successful. And again, poor attitude drives poor execution, drives poor results. Now, we've talked about the 5 problems. Now let's look at some solutions. First, build complementary leadership teams. Again, you can try to seek the unicorn, that person. Again, AI expertise, business expertise, industry expertise. You can try to find that person, but maybe it's going to, I don't want to use the word Frankenstein, but maybe you have to find a team and includes together a Frankenstein that gives you that unicorn. Find the right people, create these micro teams that can execute on what you're trying to do. Number 2, again, integrate the CIO function across all existing technologies. So this is going to require the CEO, top management, to really sit there and understand what needs to be done in terms of reorganizing the organization so that all the technology, silos begin to work as one. Very difficult to do, especially if you have people who are very territorial. But again, this is where upper management has to step in and says, all right, here's how it's going to work. Here's how we're going to work together. Here's how we're going to bring these technologies together. Big vision. Number 3, set realistic expectations. Again, ground it in reality. And based on the information you have, what you're working with, the talent that you have, the budget that you have, what is realistic? Because again, having these realistic expectations of what's going to happen is what you're going to communicate to your organization. And if you communicate something and it isn't baked yet, what happens is we try to launch a product too early and it fails. And everybody in the organization sees that. I've seen it too often. We talk about developing a new product. We go out, we developed a new product. And what happens? We push the product out too fast, or we don't have enough resources, so we put out an incomplete product. Everybody else sees it, everybody's unhappy with it, and then all of a sudden, people become even more cynical or more skeptical about any new product development or new product rollout. We see this with, like, for example, CRM systems, right? Companies switch from one CRM system to another, and it seems like every 2 or 3 years, it's a fad to change to something else. Again, when there's no consistency, where there's no commitment, what begins to happen is that we produce things that we don't really like, they don't fulfill us, and all of a sudden our employees, people who use the tools, and even our customers, our vendors, say, this is not what I expected, this was not what I waited for. So keep this in mind. Set realistic expectation of what you can do and when it's truly going to be available. Others, focus on sustainable talent. In my past organizations, we always focused on building leadership talent from within. So ask yourself that question. Instead of relying, again, on that one heroic leader, finding that one unicorn, why not internally start building that talent? In other words, look at the folks in your organization right now and then say, who can we fast track? Because that's what we used to do. We used to fast track people within our organization, because we saw the potential. And what we would do, we rotate them in different jobs. We assigned them a mentor. And again, what we were doing is developing people within the organization. And those are the people that actually shot to the top. Now, here's what's interesting. Side effect. When you start developing internal talent and these people, this talent gets promoted, the rest of the people in the organization see that and want to be part of that. So instead of you hiring from the outside, they say, this is a company that develops their internal talent and promotes them. I want to be part of that. So there's another advantage to that. The last one is mindset. When it comes to how you're going to succeed, is you have to have what I call the ACT mindset. And I use this acronym to say, hey, first we have to acknowledge that AI is a reality. So it is a reality. It's coming. It's already here. It's just a matter of when do you implement it. Number 2 is you got to commit to implementation. And the last part is you have to basically have the tenacity required to keep with it. In other words, it's never going to go well the first time. So in more detail, I would say this. When it comes to acknowledging that AI is a reality, no ostrich effect here. No ostriches allowed. So let's not put our head in the sand and say, maybe it'll go away. It's not going away. So part of the mindset to be successful, not only as a CAIO, but as a company, is to say, it is coming, we need to implement it. I don't know how, but we're going to figure out, which leads to step number 2. And that is, let's do some pilot projects. Let's do some beta. Let's start out small. Let's get some small successes. Figure out a part of your business process. And then say, you know what, here's why I think it's a high leverage activity. If we can AI this right here, fix it with AI, do certain things, and then see the results, that'll give us not only the confidence to move to another part of the business process, but it'll give everybody on the team the confidence that AI works. And maybe the third effect is people in the organization start believing that maybe AI could be an enhancing augmentation tool for their business so you guys can be more profitable. And last but not least is obviously, when you implement something, pilot project, again, review it, adjust it, do it again. Do it again, do it again. Set the expectation that it's not going to happen overnight. This is not something that's easy, but it is necessary. So again, if we have the right mindset, AI is here, we need to do something. Number 2, let's pick somewhere to start. Sometimes what the saying goes, it's the start that stops us. We don't know where to start. So let's pick a place to start. And then again, let's do a beta project, pilot project on that, then implement, and then rinse and repeat. So here are the resources that you can tap into that I base this small presentation on. Let me know what you think. Give me some feedback on this presentation. And on that note, I thank you. This is Victor Antonio. If you get an opportunity, check out the book, Future of Selling. You'll enjoy it. Take care.